The sun rose gently over the sleepy village, its warm rays kissing the tops of palm trees that swayed lazily in the morning breeze. At the edge of the river, a young boy crouched by the water, his fingers tracing idle patterns in the mud. This boy, Samuel, was no stranger to the river. He had spent many mornings here, watching his father cast his nets with the practiced precision of a seasoned fisherman.
"Listen carefully, my son,"
his father said, his voice calm but firm.
"The river is more than just water. It is life itself. We respect it, honor it, and in return, it provides for us."
Samuel nodded, his young eyes wide with curiosity. To him, the river was a mysterious world, full of secrets hidden beneath its shimmering surface. He admired his father's reverence for it, though he didn't yet understand its depth. That morning, Samuel's father allowed him to cast his first net. His small hands struggled with the weight, but his determination shone brighter than the morning sun. He cast the net awkwardly, its edges falling unevenly into the water, but his father simply smiled.
"Good, you're learning,"
he said.
"One day this river will listen to you, as it does to me."
The village was small, a close-knit community of fishermen and their families who lived in harmony with the land and water. Elders often told stories by the fire at night, recounting tales of spirits who guarded the river, of blessings granted to the humble and curses to the greedy. Samuel had listened to these tales with rapt attention, his imagination painting vivid pictures of shimmering beings beneath the water.
"Papa, do you believe in the river spirits?"
Samuel asked one evening as they prepared their nets for the next day. His father paused, his gaze distant.
"I believe the river is alive in its own way. It rewards those who respect it. But my son, never take more than you need, and never forget that this river gives as easily as it can take."
Samuel carried these words with him, like a silent rhythm that guided his days. He grew up in the shadow of his father's wisdom, learning not just the art of fishing, but the importance of humility, respect, and balance. Samuel, now taller and stronger, stood at the river's edge, the setting sun painting the water with golden light. His once soft hands were now rough and calloused from years of fishing, a testament to his growth and hard work. The river's gentle ripples seemed to speak to him, whispering secrets only he could hear. Yet, Samuel could not have imagined how deeply his fate was tied to the waters before him. The village buzzed with life as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky. Women balanced baskets of freshly harvested crops on their heads, their melodic voices filling the air as they exchanged stories. Children played in the open spaces, their laughter mingling with the rhythmic creak of paddles slicing through the river. The heart of the village was alive, and Samuel was now a part of it. Samuel had grown into a fine young man, known for his strong arms and a determination that set him apart. His father's teachings echoed in his heart every time he cast his net, guiding him to respect the river and its bounty. But even with his skills, Samuel faced challenges.
"Your catches are good, Samuel,"
his best friend Benjamin said one evening as they sat mending nets by the fire.
"But the older fishermen? They think they know it all. They won't make it easy for you to carve your place."
Samuel nodded, his jaw tightening.
"I'll show them I'm not just a boy following his father's footsteps. I have my own path to make."
The fishing community was competitive, and Samuel was eager to prove himself. He began rising earlier than the others, his small canoe often the first to glide onto the river's surface in the grey light of dawn. He studied the water's currents, learning its moods and secrets, and over time, his catches grew larger. Slowly, the villagers began to notice. "Samuel is a hard worker," said one fisherman grudgingly. "But he's young. Let's see how long he can keep up." His best friend Benjamin remained his greatest cheerleader.
Let them talk, Benjamin said with a grin. We'll see who's laughing when you're the one teaching them a thing or two.
Samuel's resolve only deepened as days turned to weeks. He spent long hours at the river, perfecting his craft and learning from every success and failure. His net became an extension of his arm, and his canoe danced with the water like it was part of him. One evening, as the sky turned shades of fiery orange, Samuel sat on the riverbank, his muscles aching, but his spirit unwavering. The river flowed steadily, its surface reflecting the twilight. It seemed to hum, almost as if it acknowledged his persistence.
I'll earn my place,
Samuel murmured to the river, his voice firm yet reverent.
not through shortcuts, but through respect and hard work.
In that moment, as the cool evening breeze whispered through the reeds, Samuel felt something stir deep within him, a connection to the river that he couldn't quite explain. Little did he know his path to greatness would soon intertwine with a force beyond his comprehension. The morning mist hung low over the river as Samuel pushed his canoe into the cool waters. His best friend, Benjamin, waved from the shore.
Don't forget to bring me something worth eating.
He shouted, laughing. Samuel chuckled, paddling out into the calm expanse. The river was unusually quiet, with only the occasional splash of fish breaking the surface. Samuel cast his net, watching as it unfurled and sank into the depths. He waited, the paddle resting lightly across his lap. Then it happened. The net jerked violently, pulling at Samuel's hands with unexpected force. His heart raced as he gripped the ropes, straining to pull the catch aboard. As the net emerged, the sunlight caught the scales of an astonishingly large haul of fish, each one glistening like polished silver.
Impossible,
Samuel whispered, staring at the bounty. He had never seen anything like it. He quickly secured the catch, his hands trembling with excitement. As he paddled back to the shore, villagers gathered to greet him, their voices rising in awe. "Samuel, look at that haul!" one exclaimed, while another shook their head in disbelief. "The river has truly favored you today." Benjamin approached, grinning ear to ear.
You'll be feeding the whole village with this,
he said, slapping Samuel on the back. Samuel smiled, but unease tugged at the edges of his thoughts. The river's silence, the sheer size of the catch, it all felt unusual. Still, he brushed off the feeling. It was just his skill and hard work paying off, wasn't it? That evening, as Samuel cleaned his catch by the river, he noticed something or someone watching him from a distance. A figure stood at the water's edge, partially hidden by the reeds. Samuel squinted, but before he could call out, the figure stepped back and disappeared into the shadows.
Did you see someone there?
Benjamin asked, coming up behind him. "No," Samuel lied, shaking his head. "Probably just the light playing tricks." But deep down, he knew it wasn't a trick. Someone or something had been there, observing him. For the first time, he felt a faint stir of something he couldn't name, as if the river itself was beginning to reveal its secrets. Later that night, as he lay on his mat, the image of the figure by the reeds lingered in his mind. Was it connected to his extraordinary catch? Samuel didn't know, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken an unexpected turn, one that would forever bind him to the river's mysterious depths. The following days were unlike any Samuel had ever known. Each time he cast his net into the river, it returned with hauls so abundant that even the oldest fisherman marveled. Word of his success spread quickly, drawing whispers from villagers and side glances from other fishermen. It's as if the river listens to him. One elder remarked, but not everyone was impressed. Among the murmurs of awe, envy began to simmer. Samuel's rival, Nathaniel, scowled as he watched Samuel unload another seemingly endless catch at the market.
This isn't natural.
Nathaniel muttered to his helpers.
No one's that lucky. He's hiding something.
Samuel remained oblivious to the brewing resentment. His thoughts were elsewhere, on the strange figure he'd seen by the river days earlier. It had stirred something in him, a feeling he couldn't shake. He began fishing earlier in the morning, staying later into the evening, hoping to glimpse the figure again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the river glowed with golden light, Samuel sat alone in his canoe. The air was still, and the water rippled gently against the boat. He was about to paddle back to shore when a soft voice called out.
Samuel.
He froze, gripping his paddle tightly. The voice was melodic, like a song carried on the wind. He turned toward the sound and saw her, a woman standing at the riverbank, her silhouette framed by the setting sun. She was beautiful beyond words, her ebony skin shimmering faintly in the twilight. Her hair cascaded down her shoulders, and her eyes held a depth that seemed to reach into his soul.
You've been blessed by this river,
she said, her voice steady but gentle.
Do you know why?
Samuel shook his head, his breath caught in his throat.
Who are you?
The woman smiled, but there was something otherworldly about it, something that sent a shiver down his spine.
A friend,
she said simply.
one who has watched you for a long time.
Samuel's heart raced as she stepped closer, the water lapping softly at her feet.
Your respect and humility have not gone unnoticed.
She continued.
But remember, the river gives as easily as it takes.
Before Samuel could respond, the woman turned and walked into the water, her form dissolving into the ripples as if she were part of the river itself. He stared at the empty shoreline, his mind racing. Back at the village, Samuel confided in Benjamin.
I saw her again.
He said, his voice barely above a whisper. Benjamin frowned.
The woman by the river?
Yes. She spoke to me. She knew my name.
Samuel.
Benjamin said cautiously.
Are you sure this isn't just your mind playing tricks? You've been spending so much time out there.
Samuel shook his head.
I know what I saw. She's connected to the river somehow. And I think she's the reason for my catches.
Benjamin's face was serious now.
If that's true, you need to be careful. Whatever this is, it's bigger than us.
Samuel nodded, though his thoughts were far from settled. He couldn't deny the connection he felt to the woman and to the river. It was as if an invisible thread now tied his fate to the water's depths. Samuel's fishing hauls grew even more extraordinary, surpassing what anyone in the village had ever seen. Each day, his canoe returned brimming with fish, shimmering like silver coins in the sunlight. Elders whispered blessings when he passed, while the younger fishermen looked on with a mix of awe and suspicion. Nathaniel, however, had grown increasingly bitter.
It's not skill.
He said to his helpers one morning as they watched Samuel unload another massive catch.
Something else is going on, and I'm going to find out what.
Unbothered by the whispers, Samuel's focus was on his mysterious benefactor. The woman, no, the goddess, had appeared twice now, her presence haunting, yet alluring. Though he didn't see her again for weeks, the sense of her, watching over him, never left. One quiet evening, as the village settled into the warmth of flickering fires, Samuel and Benjamin sat by the river, mending their nets. The air buzzed with the croaks of frogs and the rustle of reeds. Benjamin broke the silence.
Have you thought about what she said? About the river giving and taking?
Samuel nodded, his hands still busy with the net.
I think about it every day, but it doesn't feel like a warning. It feels like a gift.
Benjamin sighed.
Just don't lose yourself in it, my friend. Gifts like these don't come without a price.
The next morning, as the village prepared for the weekly market, Samuel loaded his canoe with fish. The river's favor was undeniable, and he'd become the center of attention wherever he went. At the market, villagers eagerly bought from him, often trading more than the fish were worth just to claim a share of his luck. As Samuel was stacking his baskets, a middle-aged woman approached him. She wore a simple but elegant wrapper, her posture graceful yet commanding. Her presence quieted the chatter around them.
"These are fine fish.
She said, her voice soft but clear.
How much for the lot?"
Samuel looked up, startled by her beauty. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't place it.
The lot?
He stammered.
"Yes,
Yes, he said, smiling faintly.
I have a large feast to prepare."
The price she offered was generous, far more than he expected. She paid in full, gathered the baskets, and left without another word. The market buzzed with curiosity. "Who was that?" someone asked. "I've never seen her before," another replied. Samuel didn't answer. Deep down, he knew exactly who she was, though he couldn't bring himself to say it aloud. That night, as Samuel lay on his mat, he dreamed of her again. She stood by the river, her hair flowing like the current, her eyes shimmering like the stars above. This time, she spoke his name with a tenderness that made his chest ache.
"Samuel,
She said, her voice like a song.
our paths are bound by this river, but remember, what the river gives, it expects in return."
He woke with a start, his heart pounding. The words lingered in his mind, clear as the morning light streaming through the window. He sat up, staring into the distance. Something deep inside told him this was only the beginning of a connection that would change his life forever. Samuel's nights became restless, filled with vivid dreams that blurred the line between reality and fantasy. In each dream, the river goddess appeared to him, her beauty more radiant than the stars. She spoke in riddles, her words a mix of affection and caution. The next morning, Samuel returned to the river before dawn. The air was cool, the water calm. As he cast his net, his thoughts lingered on the goddess and her mysterious warnings. His net sank into the depths, and when he pulled it up, it was heavier than ever. The fish flopped wildly, their scales catching the light in brilliant flashes. As he loaded his canoe, he heard a voice behind him.
"The river truly favors you."
Samuel turned to see the village priest standing on the bank, his eyes fixed on the hall. The priest was a wise man, respected by all for his knowledge of the spiritual and natural worlds.
It's not just the river.
Samuel admitted, his voice low.
I've seen her.
The priest's expression grew serious.
"Her? Do you mean the river goddess?"
Samuel nodded, recounting his encounters in vivid detail. The priest listened intently, his gaze never leaving Samuel's face. When the story was finished, he sighed deeply.
"She has chosen you,
The priest said.
but this is both a blessing and a burden. The river goddess does not act without purpose. Her favor comes with responsibilities and consequences."
Samuel frowned.
What kind of consequences?
The priest shook his head.
"That I cannot say, but you must tread carefully. The river gives, but it can also take. Honor it, respect her, and be mindful of your choices."
Meanwhile, Nathaniel's resentment reached its peak. Watching Samuel's success day after day had driven him to the brink of madness. He had heard whispers of Samuel's supposed connection to the river goddess, and scoffed at the idea.
It's just a story.
Nathaniel told his helpers.
He's hiding something, and I'll prove it.
That evening, as Samuel paddled out into the river to fish under the fading light, Nathaniel and his men followed silently, keeping their distance. They watched from the shadows, their boat concealed by the reeds. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed as he observed Samuel cast his net.
There's nothing special about him.
Nathaniel muttered, but the bitterness in his voice betrayed his words.
Let's see if we can find his secret.
But everything seemed normal, and Nathaniel couldn't put a finger to the source of his success. As the night wore on, Samuel returned home exhausted. He drifted into a deep sleep, and the dreams came once more. He found himself standing in the river's current, surrounded by shimmering fish. The goddess appeared beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder.
Samuel,
She said softly,
you have my favor, but the river must remain in balance. Do not let greed or envy cloud your heart.
When he woke, he felt a strange warmth in his chest, as if her touch had lingered. But her words left a shadow of doubt in his mind. What did she mean by balance? The next day, the evening air was cool, carrying the gentle hum of the river's flow. Samuel, his net coiled by his side, sat quietly in his canoe, letting the tranquility of the moment seep into his bones. The river had become more than a source of livelihood. It felt alive, pulsating with energy he could feel in his chest. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the surface of the water shimmered unnaturally, and the air grew heavy. Samuel's heart quickened, for he knew what was coming. She emerged from the mist like a vision, her silhouette framed by the dim light of the rising moon. The river goddess, Amara, stood atop the water, her feet barely disturbing its surface. Her hair flowed like ripples in a stream, and her eyes, deep and knowing, fixed on him with an intensity that made him hold his breath.
Samuel,
She said, her voice like the melody of rushing water.
I have watched you with care, and my heart has grown fond of your spirit.
He bowed his head instinctively, unsure how to respond to such a declaration. Amara, he whispered, finally calling her by name. Her visits, her voice in his dreams, and the strange blessings he'd experienced all converged into this moment. There was no longer a need to ask who she was. Amara stepped closer, the water rippling beneath her, but leaving her untouched.
You have shown humility and respect, qualities the river holds dear.
Samuel looked up, confusion flickering across his face.
I am really grateful for the river blessings. I am so short of words on my feelings towards you, Amara. I see you in my dreams almost every night.
His voice held a mix of gratitude and longing. Amara's expression softened, a rare vulnerability flickering in her eyes.
The river chose you, Samuel, just as I did, and the balance of the river must always be maintained.
Unbeknownst to them, hidden among the reeds on the far bank, Nathaniel crouched low in his canoe. His helpers trembled beside him, their wide eyes fixed on the ethereal figure standing atop the water. Nathaniel's jealousy twisted into disbelief, then rage.
So it's true. He's been using her to cheat us all.
Maybe we should leave.
One of his helpers whispered, his voice shaky.
This isn't natural.
Quiet.
Nathaniel snapped, his mind already plotting how to use this revelation to his advantage. Meanwhile, Samuel and Amara's conversation grew more intimate. Her presence was like a balm to his soul, filling him with warmth and longing.
Amara,
He said softly,
I don't know what the balance demands, but I know what I feel. Your presence, it's changed me.
Her lips curved into a bittersweet smile.
And you have changed me, Samuel. Yet the river does not bend easily. Our connection is not without consequence.
What consequences?
He asked, his voice laced with worry. She hesitated, her gaze shifting to the water.
The river thrives on harmony. Our bond disrupts that. You have already seen the signs: jealousy, unrest, and envy growing among your people. The river will not tolerate imbalance for long.
Samuel's heart ached, torn between his burgeoning feelings for Amara and his responsibility to his village. He reached out instinctively, though she stood just beyond his grasp.
What are we supposed to do?
Amara's voice softened, though the sadness in her tone was unmistakable.
We must decide, Samuel, but I cannot abandon my duty as the river's guardian. Our connection is a blessing, but it can also be a curse.
As the goddess faded back into the mist, her parting words hung heavy in the air. Samuel sat in his canoe, staring at the ripples left in her wake. His chest felt hollow, the weight of her message sinking deep into his heart. Nathaniel, still hidden, gripped his paddle tightly. His mind raced with plans to expose Samuel's secret and claim the goddess's favor for himself, blind to the danger such greed would bring. The river's whispers seemed louder that night, carrying secrets only the wise could hear, and warnings only the foolish would ignore. Nathaniel's thoughts were consumed by what he had witnessed that night by the river. The image of the goddess standing on the water and speaking with Samuel played over and over in his mind, twisting his jealousy into reckless ambition. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that Samuel had stolen the favor that should rightfully belong to him.
That's how he's been outshining us.
Nathaniel muttered to his helpers as they gathered near the docks.
It's not his skill or hard work. It's her.
His helpers exchanged uneasy glances.
What do you want to do?
One asked hesitantly. Nathaniel's voice was sharp.
We'll take it back. If the goddess blessed him, she can bless us too.
The next morning, Nathaniel and his men set out before the first light of dawn, their canoe slicing silently through the dark water. They paddled toward the deeper parts of the river where few dared to fish. Nathaniel's plan was simple: cast his net in the same spot Samuel frequented and demand the goddess's favor for himself. The air grew heavy as they approached the heart of the river. The water was unnaturally still, and an eerie quiet settled over the men. One of the helpers whispered,
This doesn't feel right, Nathaniel. Maybe we should turn back.
Nathaniel ignored him, his eyes fixed on the shimmering surface of the river.
Don't be cowards.
He snapped.
Cast the net.
They obeyed reluctantly, lowering the net into the water. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the boat lurched violently as the net jerked downward. The men scrambled to steady themselves as the ropes strained against their grip.
Pull.
Nathaniel shouted, his voice filled with excitement and greed. The net rose slowly, and what they saw made their blood run cold. It wasn't filled with fish, but with dark, writhing shapes that seemed to vanish as they surfaced. The water around the boat churned violently, and a low, guttural sound echoed through the air. Neither wind nor animal, but something unearthly. The helpers panicked.
It's a curse. The river's angry.
Hold the net.
Nathaniel bellowed, but it was too late. The boat tipped, and the men plunged into the water. Samuel was at the riverbank when he heard the distant cries. He rushed to his canoe and paddled toward the commotion, his heart pounding. As he neared the deeper waters, he saw Nathaniel's overturned boat and his helpers clinging desperately to the wreckage. But Nathaniel was nowhere to be seen.
Help us!
One of the men screamed, his voice hoarse with terror. Samuel quickly pulled them into his canoe and paddled back to shore. Once they were safe, he asked.
What happened out there?
The men were pale and trembling.
Nathaniel, he wanted to challenge the goddess. He thought he could take her favor for himself.
Samuel's stomach twisted. The river goddess had warned him about balance, and now he saw the consequences of ignoring it.
And Nathaniel?
One of the men shook his head.
The river took him.
Samuel sat outside his hut that evening, weaving a new fishing net under the glow of a lantern. The rhythmic chirping of crickets filled the air, but his mind was far from the task at hand. His heart was heavy with guilt and fear, the memory of Nathaniel's disappearance haunting him. Setting the net aside, he clasped his hands together and whispered a quiet prayer, not for himself, but for the village and for Nathaniel, whose greed had led him to a watery grave. A soft breeze rustled the nearby palm leaves, and when Samuel looked up, the river goddess stood before him, her form radiant even in the dim light. There was sorrow in her eyes, a weight she carried with grace.
Samuel,
She said gently, her voice like a flowing stream.
you now understand why the river must remain in balance. Greed disrupts harmony, and the river cannot forgive such transgressions.
I understand, but I wish it hadn't come to this.
The river does not take without purpose. Let this be a reminder to your people. The river is not to be challenged.
Samuel lowered his head, a solemn vow forming in his heart. He would honor her blessings and ensure the village learned from Nathaniel's fate so that the river's harmony would never be disrupted again. The village buzzed with unease in the days following Nathaniel's disappearance. His helpers, pale and shaken, spoke in hushed tones about what had happened on the river. Though they avoided direct accusations, the tale of Nathaniel's greed and the river's wrath spread quickly. The air felt thick with fear, and for the first time, villagers began to see Samuel's extraordinary fishing hauls in a different light. Samuel, unaware of the gossip swirling around him, was busy repairing the thatched roof of his hut. He had set his mind to practical tasks, hoping to quiet the storm of emotions inside him. The rhythm of his work brought a small measure of peace, but his thoughts were never far from Amara's warning or the haunting memory of Nathaniel's fate.
Samuel!
Benjamin's voice called out from below, snapping him from his thoughts. Samuel climbed down, brushing bits of straw from his hands.
What is it?
Benjamin's expression was serious.
The elders want to see you. There's talk about what happened to Nathaniel.
Samuel's chest tightened.
What kind of talk?
Benjamin hesitated.
Some are saying the river goddess is angry, that you've brought her wrath upon the village.
Samuel's heart sank. He had always respected the river and its balance, but now his connection to Amara was becoming a source of fear for the villagers. The elders gathered under the tree, their faces etched with worry. Samuel stood before them, his best friend at his side. The village priest, seated among the elders, raised a hand for silence.
Samuel,
The priest began, his voice steady.
we have heard troubling stories. The river has been calm for many years, but now there are whispers of imbalance.
One elder leaned forward, his gaze piercing.
Nathaniel is gone. The fish have grown scarce for some, and yet your nets are always full. Can you tell us why?
Samuel swallowed hard, choosing his words carefully.
The river has blessed me as it has blessed others before me. I have never taken more than I need.
The priest studied him for a moment, then spoke.
Blessings from the river are not without purpose, Samuel. If the goddess has chosen you, she must also have given you a responsibility. Have you honored it?
Samuel lowered his gaze, his thoughts flickering to Amara's warning about balance.
I have tried.
He said quietly.
I always will.
That evening, Samuel sat outside his hut, staring at the horizon. The villagers' questions had stirred doubts he couldn't ignore. The balance of the river, the weight of its favor. He felt the burden more acutely than ever. The soft rustle of leaves drew his attention. Amara stood nearby, her form bathed in the silver glow of moonlight. She approached him slowly, her expression unreadable.
They fear what they don't understand.
She said, her voice calm.
But their fears are not unfounded. The balance of the river has shifted.
Samuel looked up at her, the pain in his eyes evident.
I never meant for this to happen. What can I do to fix it?
The balance can only be restored if you give back to the needy in the community, Samuel, and cleansing ritual done by the riverbank to appease the deity. You must use your fortune to protect the river and help those who have less, she said. Share your abundance, and the harmony will return.
Samuel nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling over him. He had always thought of the river's blessings as a gift, but now he saw them as a responsibility. He vowed silently to honor Amara's guidance, even as the path ahead remained uncertain. The village remained restless, but Samuel's resolve grew stronger. With each passing day, he worked not just for himself, but for the people around him. The river's balance depended on it, and so did his bond with the goddess who watched over it. The village buzzed with tension as Samuel worked quietly in the field outside his hut, tending to the yam mounds he had planted. It was rare for him to take a break from fishing, but the recent events weighed heavily on his mind. The loss of Nathaniel, the whispers among the villagers, and the warnings from Amara all felt like waves crashing against him, one after the other. His thoughts turned to the widows and orphans of the village, those who struggled the most. The next morning, Samuel began delivering baskets of fish to their doorsteps, ensuring they had enough to eat. He visited the homes of the elderly, offering to repair their roofs. Word of his generosity spread quickly, softening the whispers of doubt. When young men approached him, eager to learn his fishing techniques, Samuel didn't turn them away. He promised to teach them everything his father had taught him, guiding them with the same respect and humility he had learned from the river. The widows and orphans spoke of his kindness, and the young men praised his patience as he taught them to fish. Though doubt still lingered in some hearts, the seed of trust was slowly being planted. Samuel knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he felt a quiet strength within him, a strength that came from the river, from Amara, and from the love he carried for his people. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the river. Samuel stood at the water's edge, his heart heavy with the weight of a decision he had been trying to ignore. Amara's presence was already palpable, her arrival heralded by the gentle rustling of reeds and the faint shimmer of the water's surface. When she appeared, her form bathed in an ethereal light. Samuel's chest tightened. She was as radiant as ever, her beauty almost unbearable to behold. But tonight, her expression was different, somber, as if she too sensed what was coming.
Samuel,
she said softly, stepping closer. Her voice, though gentle, carried a hint of sadness.
you've called me. What troubles your heart?
Samuel hesitated, but before he could speak, Amara's gaze dropped, and she continued.
I've been trying to hold on to something I know isn't meant to last. I can't stop thinking about the things I can never give you. A home, children, a life beyond this river.
Her voice broke slightly, and for a moment the world seemed to still.
You don't have to say it, Samuel. I've known it too.
Amara, I love you, more than I ever thought possible. But our love, it's tearing me apart. You have your duty, your place here, and I have mine in the village. I can't let this bond destroy us both.
Amara lifted her eyes to meet his, tears glistening like stars.
And I love you, Samuel. But you're right. The mortal and the divine were never meant to intertwine. Our love, as beautiful as it is, also disrupts the balance we both hold dear.
For a long moment, they stood in silence, the river their only witness.
Will you ever forget me?
Amara asked, her voice breaking slightly.
Never.
Samuel replied, his voice firm despite the ache in his chest.
You will always be in my heart, Amara. Always.
Amara smiled, though it was bittersweet.
And I will always watch over you, Samuel. Your name will be whispered by the river long after we part.
The river seemed to ripple in sorrow as Amara stepped back. Her form began to fade, dissolving into the mist.
Goodbye, my love,
she whispered, her voice carried away by the wind.
Goodbye, Amara,
Samuel said, his voice barely audible. As she vanished, Samuel fell to his 2 knees, the weight of the moment overwhelming him. He stayed by the river until dawn, the first light of day bringing a sense of finality to their parting. The months after Amara's departure were some of the hardest Samuel had ever faced. The mornings were quiet, the river's once comforting whispers now carrying a hollow echo. Though his hands were busy with work, repairing roofs for the elderly, tending to his crops, and helping the widows and orphans, his heart remained heavy, the emptiness a constant ache. One evening, as Samuel sat outside his hut, Benjamin joined him.
You've done enough for one day.
Benjamin said.
You can't work away what's in your heart?
Samuel sighed.
I don't know if it'll ever go away.
It will.
Benjamin said with quiet confidence.
But you have to let it go. The river gave you something beautiful, Samuel, but it also gave you a life here.
Samuel nodded, though he wasn't sure he believed it. A week later, Samuel was at the market, trading his latest catch for supplies. The hum of voices, the vibrant colors of fabrics, and the tantalizing food filled the air. His attention was caught by a woman at a neighboring stall. She was helping an older woman, her laughter soft yet infectious. Samuel found himself staring longer than he intended. Her presence was magnetic, unassuming yet full of life. When she looked up and caught his gaze, he quickly turned away, his face flushing.
Are you going to stand there or introduce yourself?
Benjamin teased, nudging him playfully. Samuel chuckled nervously.
I'm not sure what to say.
Start with hello. It usually works.
Gathering his courage, Samuel approached the woman. Up close, her beauty was even more striking. Her warm brown eyes and radiant smile seemed to light up the space around her.
Hello,
Samuel said, his voice steady despite his nerves.
I'm Samuel.
She smiled, her expression kind.
I'm Miriam.
Their connection grew gradually over the following months. Miriam was new to the village, having come to live with her aunt after losing her mother. Despite her own hardships, she had a lightness about her, a joy that seemed to fill the spaces where Samuel's grief lingered. Miriam admired Samuel's selflessness and the way he cared for the village, often joining him on his trips to deliver fish to widows and orphans. Samuel, in turn, found himself drawn to her kindness, her resilience, and the easy way she brought laughter back into his life. One day, as they sat by a small stream outside the village, Miriam asked him,
Do you ever think about her?
Samuel hesitated but nodded.
I do, but meeting you, It's helped me see that there's more to life than what I lost.
We can carry the past with us, Samuel, but we don't have to let it stop us from moving forward.
For the first time in months, Samuel felt a weight lift from his heart. When Samuel decided to ask Miriam to be his wife, he did so with a quiet certainty. He visited her aunt to ask for her blessing, and when he proposed, Miriam's smile was all the answer he needed. The village buzzed with excitement as preparations for the wedding began. Miriam's family worked tirelessly to ensure the ceremony would be a joyous occasion, filled with laughter, music, and the aroma of freshly prepared dishes. Samuel contributed by providing an abundance of fish for the feast, his generosity symbolizing his gratitude for the new chapter of his life. On the morning of the wedding, Samuel took a solitary walk to the river, its surface calm and shimmering under the early light. Whispering a quiet goodbye to the love he had lost and a silent thank you for the love he had found. The river rippled gently, as if offering its blessing. The wedding was a vibrant celebration, filled with the joyous sounds of drums and traditional songs. Miriam's family compound was adorned with colorful fabrics and flowers, and the village gathered to share in the happiness of the day. Samuel, dressed in an intricately patterned wrapper, stood with Benjamin at his side, his face alight with a smile that hadn't been there in months. When Miriam appeared, dressed in a radiant gold gown, Samuel's breath caught. She walked toward him with grace and confidence, her smile mirroring his own. Under the shade of the great baobab tree, they exchanged vows, their words carrying the promise of a life built on love and resilience. The village erupted in cheers, the air alive with celebration. As the festivities continued late into the night, Samuel looked around at the laughter, the dancing, and the joy that surrounded him. His heart, once heavy with sorrow, now felt full of hope, of love, and of gratitude. Though Amara's memory would always remain, it was the life he had built with Miriam, the village, and the river that carried him forward. And for the first time in a long while, Samuel felt truly at peace